Testing for stream. Testing for stream. Testing for the stream.
Testing. Sounds good. Testing. 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 How we doing? Testing. I can move the podium where I want to. Hello. Hello. Louder. Testing, testing. Realistically, I'll probably be like this. Like this. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Yeah, that seems better. Testing, testing. I can't hear you. Testing, testing. 1, 2. For folks dying to hear about international agreement verification, we're just testing the audio. We'll be ready soon. It may come as no surprise to you that we're testing the audio, but transparency is important.
All right, everyone, we're going to start in about 1 minute if you want to take some seats. All right, let's get rolling. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Trajectory Labs. If it's your first time here, can you raise your hand, please? Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for joining us. If you need to go to the washroom, straight outside the glass doors. If you're wondering about us, we are a nonprofit organization interested in helping people in Toronto solve the biggest pressing problems with AI. So we do that by running a series of events. And we also provide workspace for researchers working on some of the most critical problems. So if you're interested in learning more about us, you can come talk to myself or Wim or Georgia at the back, and we'd be happy to tell you more about the org. Without further ado, let's get into today's presentation. We do collect questions through the Slido app. So if you'd like to ask questions during the presentation, you'll notice there are some orange posters on the wall. You can scan that QR code. That will take you to our URL, where you can submit questions and you can vote on other people's questions. If it's a quick clarification type thing, then I will just pop in and ask them to clarify. But we do prefer to keep most questions for the end for our Q&A. So I would encourage you to go there. That's, I think, all the prep we need. Big warm welcome to Wim Hausen-Kreuzberg, who will be presenting today on verification for international AI agreements.
Thank you, Mario. Yeah, thank you all for coming. So, as you may have guessed, I'll be talking about verification mechanisms for international AI agreements. I am an independent AI policy researcher, and I came across this paper that it's a mega paper, so it's a kind of a paper that lots and lots of people have kind of contributed to, and it's trying to give an overview of this topic as a whole, right? Which is an important one. It's a new field in general, and it's a topic that has received, all topics can receive more attention, but this, including this one, and it's the kind of thing that struck me and other people, I think, as something that is good to read, but it's very dense. It's very well written, and I respect the authors a lot, but it's somewhat dry, and it's the kind of thing that you might think is a good idea, and then you never do it. And hopefully, what I'm going to be doing is going over this talking about international agreements in general, and verifying them, and I'll be talking about that mostly in the context of this paper. And then hopefully, if you want to go investigate the paper more, you are better equipped to do so. And maybe even better, you don't have to do it at all. So I want to start by, oh, hello. All right, this slide, we're gonna engage our imaginations here. It's not coming up, but this slide has on the right-hand side a section of text, and it has a bunch of many listed proposed mechanisms for verifying international agreements. And the key point here is that there are many ways that we can do this, and there are many ways that build towards solutions that currently exist. There are many ways that are proposed, and I am not going to go into the specific mechanisms. I'm not going to give an overview of them. What we will be doing instead is, as featured on the left-hand side, going over why this is important for international agreements, why this is important for international AI governance, and we're going to talk about what the prospects for verification are, and kind of where we're at right now. So why is this important? When countries are trying to coordinate, they often can't just trust each other on good faith. Unfortunately, we know this. We need people to verify things. Okay, great. I think there are a couple of ways to think about this. One is as a collective action problem, right? So we have the kind of empirical work that we have, not at the international scale, but that we have on trying to figure out what the institutional structures that succeed in solving collective action problems are, right? And here we're thinking about international coordination as a collective action problem. One of the features of these institutions is that they are able to monitor who is complying with the policies that everyone has agreed to, right? So if I'll leave it there. And so empirically, it just seems important. It seems that we need people to verify compliance. If we also just look at the history of agreements that have international agreements and international agreements focused on dual use technologies, the ones that have worked, that have been more successful, have had verification mechanisms in place. And I think there's a nice intuition for this, right? If we think about a prisoner's dilemma, right? Hopefully people are familiar with this. If not, let me know. It's very easy to solve a prisoner's dilemma and have both people not defect if you could just verify whether or not they're going to defect, right? Or maybe it's happening in slow motion. You can check, whether they're going to defect. So, it's kind of immediately easier. It kind of solves the problem. It goes a significant part of the way towards solving the problem for us, which is nice. Maybe more a concrete example, right? That one of the precursors to earlier this year during the summer, the U.S. bombing of Iran and the Iranian nuclear facility was the finding that Iran seemed to not have been complying with the international standards. Oh, that's better. Okay. With the international standards for Iran wasn't complying with the international standards around nuclear regulations, and so we can verify agreements. That's very nice. It's very helpful. Yes. By the way, is it clear why international coordination is a collective action problem, where we have this outcome that would be nice, like we're all kind of complying with these regulations. But complying with the regulations can put a country at a strategic disadvantage, and so the best outcome for any given country is to pretend that they're complying with the regulations in some cases, but not actually be complying with them. So we need to be able to verify whether or not we're actually complying with them. Yeah. Okay. So that's one way of thinking about why verification is important in the context of international agreements in general. I think that when it comes to international agreements about AI, it's been proposed, and in this paper they propose it in this way, where there are kind of 5 different things that could be the object of such an agreement, right? We could have agreements about transfers of knowledge, right? So maybe this is information about specific risks or specific that have happened as countries are developing various kinds of AI systems. Maybe it's a transfer of resources, right? So, for instance, in the development of satellites, there were some countries that were falling behind and had very kind of nascent satellite industries, and the relevant international bodies organized a transfer, or attempted to have a transfer of resources to enable countries that had fallen behind to kind of advance their own domestic industries. So we can imagine a similar transfer of resources. Maybe we're transferring computer chips, right? Maybe we're transferring talent, right? Something like that. We can also imagine a pooling of resources. For instance, you could imagine there have been some proposals for international joint AI labs, right? So for some kinds of AI systems, you won't have one country developing them. Oh, wow. Hopefully you can hear me better now. You won't have one country developing them by themselves. You'll have the US and China like a CERN for AI, right? We're not going to talk about any of those because they are, as of right now, the means to implement agreements focused on those things are within our grasp. And that's exciting. But what is trickier are agreements that would hope to focus on emergency preparedness, and agreements that would hope to bring about regulations in general, right? So maybe these are international technical standards, right, that we want countries to be compliant with. Yeah, and these are much harder, and I think they are also, importantly in this context, more directly relevant to AI safety and security, right? So if we're in that sense, like looking at international AI agreements from a kind of safety and security motivated point of view, it's concerning that these two are the tricky ones. And why is it that they are the tricky ones? You may ask, if you are listening closely. The reason is that what you need to be able to do in these cases is verify compliance with rules about computation, about what is happening on the AI chips that are training and running AI systems. And that's hard to do. I think that's hard to do in general, right? it's kind of an inherently opaque thing, right? When people say, what is one criticism you might hear about kind of to the idea of regulating AI is that it's just math, right? And this is maybe silly, but in this context, maybe it has some merit, right? Like it kind of is. It's hard to do. Like, how do you do that? This is kind of a kind of naive intuition pump, but I think it actually has merit here. And I think, for instance, right, this is also a case where multilateralism is useful for verification, right? Because we can think about unilateral ways of verifying things, right? Like typically, not only are we kind of hoping that the verification mechanisms we have in place via the multilateral agreement that we have created that those are the only ones that we're looking to. We're also, there's espionage going on, there are all these kinds of things, right? But there are limits to that. So in the case of AI, for instance, states can use unilateral verification, right, outside of the agreement, the hypothetical agreement, to look at things like financial transactions that might be happening, to look at power, right? We can use satellite imagery to look at data centers, but you can't use those things to look at what's happening inside the data centers, right? And in those cases, what you would want is the equivalent of someone going to the nuclear site, right? Like in the case of the IAEA, of the nuclear regulatory body, or maybe you'd want something else. You want some kind of automatic mechanism that's on the hardware, right? And that would be great, right? And so it's maybe one example that we'll kind of stick with throughout here is we might imagine an international agreement that says that we want to try and prevent systems that can make chemical and biological weapons. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is we're going to ban information that would allow for those capabilities to be included in the corpus of text used to train these AI systems. Suppose they're large language models. And so in that case, okay, we need to make sure that the pre-training data does not include this kind of whatever kind of information, right? You can't do that if you are just using satellites, right? You can't do that if you're sending someone on site and trying to have them check, right? Where it's harder, right? And there are reliability issues. There are all these problems. And what does this lead us to? This leads us to the view that hardware-enabled mechanisms, things that are connected to the actual, you think of a data center, right? A Costco-sized warehouse that has a bunch of racks and servers and GPUs in there, right? That mechanisms that are embedded in that hardware already would seem promising, right? As opposed to a person, as opposed to these other things. But this is tricky, right? And this is tricky in part because of the inherent problem of how do you have compliance with these rules, but it's also tricky because there are political tractability issues. And some of these are warranted, right? I think there are also there are issues with preserving privacy, right? So what we want are ways to be able to verify information about what is happening when we are training and running AI systems in ways that don't reveal that information itself, right? We want to be able to say, in the other case, in the case of, we want to be able to say the pre-training data does not include, or sorry, the data that we're using to train the AI systems doesn't include any of this information that might be dangerous without revealing what that information is, right? And that's hard. And I think that there are some concerns about this, right? So there are some people who have, I think there's an impulse generally to just kind of be concerned with the amount of with power concentration, with governmental power concentration, right? We have people who are kind of concerned that this could be a manifestation of the Antichrist. We have people who are concerned that this could bring about a kind of 1984 situation, right? Some of these people are some of the critical people currently shaping US AI policy. So these are not concerns to be taken for granted or to be taken lightly. I can expand on that if that is of interest. And there are also there's a legitimate basis for this, right? Maybe one intuition here is that I think in the mid to late 2000s, for instance, there was this NIST standard, as an international standard that was for a way that they were kind of generating random numbers. And it turned out that NIST had actually planted a backdoor in this approach that they had that allowed them to do a bunch of spying, right? Maybe we're not all completely aghast at the idea that something like this could be attempted. So what do we do in light of this? And okay, maybe there's a concern that, like, okay, well, there are all these vibes around around infringements on privacy and government power. That sounds bad. But is there an actual basis for this? Like, why is it that in trying to convey information, doesn't always work? I think here's one example that I personally like, that I find resonates. And I actually don't, and we need to know where Waldo is for this to really hit home. Well, we can do without it. But if I don't know where Waldo, so if someone could find where Waldo is in the meantime, that would be great. Someone who ideally already understands the subject information. But basically we can imagine, like, suppose that I in fact did know where Waldo is, right? And if I did know where Waldo is, I could, but I don't, we're doing this very petty thing where, like, I want you to prove that you know where Waldo is, and you want me to prove that I know where Waldo is. But if I prove that I know where Waldo is first, then then you'll know where Waldo is, right? And so that doesn't work. And what's happened there is that I have shown that I know where Waldo is, but in doing so, like the typical way that I would do it would just say, oh, Waldo's right over there. See, I know. I'm also then showing you, I'm giving you information about the information, right? And so ideally what you'd want to do is to have like a massive sheet of paper, like a really big sheet of paper with a Waldo cutout. And I can just move this sheet of paper that's so big that you lose kind of a context for without revealing any information, any additional information about where Waldo is, right? And so in the context of verifying international agreements, we want to say, okay, maybe, you are, maybe we want to say, are you above or below this threshold, right, for the size of your training run, without maybe revealing what the size of the training run was. We just want to be able to say yes or no. Are you compliant, right? Yeah, okay, and that's kind of tricky to do. Okay, and we're not there yet, and we'll talk about where we are broadly in terms of our capacity to have these to do this when it comes to the various aspects of AI training and running AI systems that we might want to regulate. But ideally, the goal that we were, or the shape, at least in the paper that this is kind of structured on, the shape of the kind of thing we would want looks like this, right? And they kind of in the report, one of the main things they do is highlight 2 ways we could achieve this. And this is a pain. Well, no, it's kind of fine. So what this is a way we could achieve something like this kind of verification, right? We're not really giving additional information. So in this case, you have the prover. Let's say, like we are Canada. Cohere has a brand new model, and they need to prove that it's compliant with international standards, and the verifier is the international body, say. And of course, Cohere, the prover, wants to demonstrate that they're compliant without revealing any of their trade secrets, without revealing, anything about the algorithm or the model weights. Okay, how do we do this? Well, here's one thing you can do, right? And maybe we stick to an example about, so Cohere actually wants to prove that their model is, they don't have any of the pre-training, none of the data they use to train the AI systems has information that you could use to make chemical weapons. That's what they want to prove. Okay, that's a good example. Let's look at that. Ideally, what's happening here, spoiler alert, is, yeah, it's right here. The verifier would So the verifier would, one thing that you actually have in these cases is you can have like a training plan. You can have a detailed plan of, these are all the things that we're gonna do when we train the system. And then you can have like a transcript, okay? You can have like, you have a transcript of what they did. It's like they say, this is what we're gonna do, and then they actually just show you the training transcript, right? This is very valuable information. This is very valuable information. And what could happen here is that Cohere, the prover, sends the transcript and sends the plan to this blue thing, and we can call this like a mutually verifiable data set. Okay, and in this and what this thing does is it allows both sides to verify that the hardware is in compliance and the software that they're using is in compliance with these rules they've agreed on. And what that is able to do is like check that actually the training plan is aligned with the training transcript and that the training plan is aligned with the the regulations, without revealing any additional information, right? And then they can just say, okay, yes or no, have they complied? They can send that information then to the verifier. And that's very nice, because there what's happened is that we say, okay, we're basically going to try and have this third party location where we can verify compliance, right? And we don't need to go and kind of stick our nose the U.S. doesn't have to isn't having China stick its nose in OpenAI's Aberdeen data center or what have you. And so this is the ideal, right? Then there are a couple of ways that we could achieve something that has this shape, and we're working towards them right now. And it seems like if we had a kind of concerted effort over the next few years, that within, I think, 3 years, within 5 years, maybe 3 years, we would be able to achieve something like this. And okay, so that's nice, right? So verification, it's possible. It's maybe not within our grasp, but we're on track to having it be within our grasp. Okay, but we're not there yet. And part of why we're not there yet, is that we don't have, there is some R&D that still needs to be done, right? There are things that currently technically do not work. My sense, though, is that most of the problems are actually logistical problems, are actually political problems. And we have at least all the building blocks in place. What we need to do is, like, if we're gonna have this mutually verifiable data center, there's like a ton of stuff that needs to go into that, right? There's like there's like all these kinds of this hardware, these kind of hardware modifications, and this like monitoring that needs to happen. And you need to assemble all of that, right? Let alone you need to have the political will and all of the agreements, people sign the things to make it happen. And that seems to be the central problem. Like for instance, yeah, one other kind of problem is around with respect to privacy, is about cybersecurity, right? So when they're doing this verification, can we make sure that now we're kind of in that involves sending all this sensitive information? Can we make sure that this won't be hacked? No, we can't. But also, we can't make sure that we're not kind of getting the sensitive information in general, no matter where we are. And so this is a general problem, and it also applies in this case, but it's not specific to verification. To be more concrete, the problem of being able to keep sensitive information is one that we have not solved right now. The AI labs currently are not able to really secure their model weights from other organized states. And so it's also true when they're trying to verify stuff, but it's not unique to verification. Okay, now where are we then right now? Where are we? Hard to say. Well, for me, I would be nice if I had a background in cryptography and hardware-enabled AI governance mechanisms. I don't. But I think a way of kind of categorizing the different things that we might have is I think it's important to distinguish basically between. Okay, maybe one we can say this is we can just go back to this this graph, right? This is very useful. I actually had ChatGPT make this, but I remember seeing something like this on Twitter, right? And what's happening here is you have this kind of the snake saying "Don't tread on me." It's hoarding a bunch of GPUs, right? And I think that I want to point to two ways in which this is not accurate. And the first one, thankfully, because again, it's a legitimate concern. If the clicker will allow it. Yes. The first one is that there are both on-chip mechanisms and off-chip mechanisms. I think typically what we think of is, or at least what happens in my head is like we have our nice version chips that then have something implanted in them, and then now they're being monitored by the U.S. government. I think there are on-chip mechanisms, but there are also off-chip mechanisms, right? There are things that we can do when it comes to the other parts of the IT infrastructure that makes up the data centers, that also seems easier. So that there's that part. And there's also the part that we are not only talking about new mechanisms. There are also existing mechanisms that allow this, right? I think there are new generations of chips already that allow for confidential computing, that allow for the kind of privacy preservation where we can garner information about what's happening without actually accessing that information itself. And so we shouldn't only be talking about putting on new mechanisms, right? And I think a lot of the political opposition is to, putting stuff on chips. But actually, no, we already have mechanisms in chips as they exist right now. But admittedly, it's hard also technically to kind of add new mechanisms to chips because building chips is very difficult. And I think by comparison, off-chip mechanisms seem quite tractable. It could take maybe even just a matter of months of concerted effort to get some of the effects that we'd be trying to get otherwise. But by just having the monitoring devices, for instance, be on different parts of the IT infrastructure, that's not the actual chips themselves. Right? And some of this exists right now. Some of it doesn't. Some of it there's a scaffolding. Some of it there's there are these. Some of them are basically there, right? But yeah, again, there are many mechanisms, and this seems to be where we're at right now. Yeah, so I think I'm going to end it there. Hopefully, you have now an overview and a sense of